So it is 3 o'clock. So I am going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. So welcome everybody to the October Pre-Planning Commission. I gotta look up that name. It's just it's a long, awkward name, but it's the meeting before the Planning Commission hearing on Monday. So the first item on the agenda is a continuance for East Pat Lofts.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this item is being continued for 60 days. The applicant has requested that time frame. They did, if you recall at the workshop, their archaeological investigation or assessment was still under review. We were waiting to hear back from our consultant who reviews the product of their consultant, and our consultant and theirs confirmed that they actually do need to take the next step and do a level, a phase 2 assessment. So they will be completing that. 60 days hopefully will be sufficient for them to complete that on their side, and then for us to review and confirm whatever results came out of that. So that is being continued.
Okay, so I'm just gonna look at the two of you and ask if either of you have any questions.
Nope.
Okay, and I don't have any questions either. So I think that is fairly clear. And April, we do need to vote on continuances, which, okay. All right, new business. The first item is Pistaro's Restaurant.
Yes, thank you. This is a pretty straightforward application. We discussed at the workshop 2 months ago, not just last month, but previously. There's only one recommendation for a condition of approval, and that's just capturing in a note form on the plan the applicant's commitment to make that 1% contribution of the project cost towards landscaping or on-site amenities. They have indicated that they anticipate being able to achieve that, but are waiting to figure out the final cost of the actual project itself to figure out what that 1% is. The note would just basically memorize that, and then if the applicant, once we get through the building permit phase, finds that they cannot meet that 1%, they would have to return with a final site plan revision and ask for a modification to that standard or with the Planning Commission. So the note just kind of formalizes that to make sure on staff's end, when we get a permit, we know to be checking for that and make sure we have that. That is the only condition on that one. There are no modifications.
And I didn't see anything new since the workshop.
No, that one was in good shape with the workshop.
Okay. Commissioner Beatty, any questions, comments?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner Lee?
No questions or comments.
Okay, terrific. All right, next on the agenda is Nicolak expansion, Riverside Corporate Park.
Thank you. There has been an update on this one since the workshop. As you may recall in your workshop packet and in the digital version, the copy of the lighting plan that we had was really faint. You couldn't see the foot candle readings of the illumination levels on the plan at all. So that was one of our comments at the time. The applicant has since provided a better lighting plan that's readable. And there is a little bit of light spillover on Progress Court. So they are asking for a modification of that. So that will be one of your votes on Monday evening. And then the other vote you'll be taking is for the site plan itself. And we have just one condition, and that is also noting if the modifications approved for the lighting.
Do a roll call. Commissioner Beatty?
No questions, thank you.
And Commissioner Lee?
No questions.
And just confirming, as I haven't driven out there recently, the other side of Progress Court where the spillover, that is also industrial, commercial, right? It's not residential.
Correct.
Right, that's what I thought. I drive through that area on my way to Linganore. Okay, next two items are both for Tonics parking lot relocation. Let's do the final site plan first, because there is an addition on the next one. the forest plan. So go ahead.
Yeah, there are some updates, and there are some updates on the final site plan as well. As you may recall at the workshop, we talked about the various levels of screening that they needed. We have two different buffering requirements. Well, there are a couple, there's some related to outdoor storage, but two that apply here. So there's a property line screening requirement that's based on the zoning district of the property we're looking at, and then the zoning of the property that we're adjacent to. And then there's a parking lot screening requirement when there's a parking lot more than 10 vehicle spaces. Both of those apply in this situation. And along that northern property line, they have the stormwater facility. They had some confusion on their notes, and they still do, about where those two standards do apply. But they have been able to increase the screening for the parking lot to meet those the level 2 requirement. I believe. Yes. But the property line screening, they still can't meet the entire lengths of all the property lines. On the north, you have the stormwater facility that's precluding, and utilities that's precluding some plantings. And then on the south side, there's like the cross access and the shared drive and things. So they're still requesting that modification. But we do need to just clarify some notes. Substantively, it all makes sense. It's just the way they have things noted.
Okay.
And so you have that modification,
sorry.
and then yeah, just the final site plan and a couple of just technical notes for cleanup.
Okay. And I'll just say, I really like in the request how they put the requirement for a level 1 buffer along the property lines abutting the IST and the PB zoned. It just gives a little bit more information in that request. So, all right, let's start with Commissioner Lee. Any questions or comments?
No question.
And Commissioner Beatty?
No questions, thanks.
Okay, I'm good on that too. And now, same item, same property, but the combined forest stand delineation and preliminary forest conservation plan.
So on this plan, we do have some substantive changes at the workshop. They were requesting a full fee in lieu of payment, so they weren't going to be providing any of their forest conservation requirement on their site. Our forest conservation ordinance requires people to kind of exhaust all the opportunities to look, first at retaining forest if you have it, then at planting new forest, and kind of has this prioritization list of all of the different ways you can mitigate. And the very last is the fee in lieu of. So we asked the applicant at the workshop to go back and look at some alternatives instead of jumping straight to that fee in lieu of, and they were able to accomplish 2 areas for landscaping credits. So they've reduced their fee in lieu of payment. Those easement areas, they won't be truly forested like a forest. The code allows for landscape credit areas to be a little more manicured than forest, which you just plant and then walk away and let nature do its thing. These can be a little more maintained and oftentimes are more compatible in, office park and, different types of settings. So that is a good thing. They will have to do a final forest conservation plan, which is completely administrative after this plan is approved, and then the areas will go into easement. They still do have a little bit of fee in lieu of, but much better to have on-site credits.
Okay. Commissioner Beatty?
No, I don't have any questions on this. Thank you.
And Commissioner Lee? Okay. And I don't have any questions either, but I thought that was a really good outcome, because we don't often see that an applicant can go back and almost actually get all of this reforestation done on the property. So they were close. All right, next item, JT Motorsports Industrial Center.
Yeah, so this is one of the sites off of Tilco Drive. This is adding 2 new expansions to the building. I'm sorry, there are three additions. There have not been any substantive changes. We do have one requirement for condition that requires them to provide the documentation from the FAA and the MAA that the new construction won't pose a hazard to any air traffic because of the proximity to the airport and its location in the airport overlay. So there's a standard form. It's called the Form 7460 that they go through the FAA and the MAA, and then they provide us proof of that. So that's kind of the one substantive definitive comment, and then the other is just technical updating a note.
So on page 5, there was a change with the street trees.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you are absolutely right. Yeah. At the workshop, I forgot about that part. At the workshop, they had too many street trees. While that sounds like a nice problem to have, they were conflicting with sight distance and causing some concern, as well as the area that our city staff, our arborist needs to maintain trees properly. There needs to be some separation between them. So they have reduce the number of street trees to the number we've required. And when we touch on the forest conservation plan next, that did end up diminishing some of the credit that they were receiving for new street trees towards their forest conservation. So a bit of a double-edged sword, and it increased their fee in lieu of because that credit was reduced.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Beatty?
Nothing, thanks.
Okay, and Commissioner Lee?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All righty, moving right along. The 550 Highland Center.
Yes, and it is, I will definitely address it on Monday evening. Sorry, switching between screens. Let me find the right place I want to be. So this was discussed several months back at a workshop, maybe August. It's probably in the staff report. But they had to be continued. They hadn't completed their stormwater, and then, as you know, last month we had an issue with the public notice getting in the Frederick News Post in time. There was an error at the paper, so this project had to be continued because there wasn't proper public notice for it. So it's been a couple months since we've seen it, but at the workshop, we did discuss the connection to the Wren Quarter project, because that's one of the modifications that they're requesting under Section 601 of the code. Any parking lot with more than 100 vehicle spaces is supposed to provide connections, vehicular connections to public street, and then ideally an adjoining property to create interconnectivity and not concentrate vehicles at any one access point. If the applicant cannot, if it's impractical, or the exact language is in your code, if it's impractical or impossible to make a connection to an adjoining property, then the commission can approve a plan with 2 accesses to public streets. So they have 2 access points that are existing. They want to continue to retain their access, but at the workshop, we spent a lot of time talking about the connection to the Wren Quarter project and exactly where that was. And my radar was definitely off that day because I was pointing you to the completely wrong thing. So in your packet, you have a new exhibit that hopefully highlights where, and I can bring up on our GIS real quick if it's helpful, where that connection in the Wren Quarter project was that was sort of stubbing out to this site, but that the applicant does not want to pursue, and they want to maintain their 2 access points. Let me bring this up real quick. So I apologize. I was sending everyone on a wild goose chase. So just to point out, hopefully the exhibit is pretty clear. So this is the Wren Quarter project. It's better oriented like this. In the real world, we're coming up Monocacy here. Patrick is down here, further down there. So here's the subject property. We're looking at 550 Highland with the little pipe stem out, and there's Monroe. The Wren Quarter project had this Tiller Street or Tiller Road that is a residential serving road that was stubbed to the property line. This little inset on the plan hopefully shows you a little bit better exactly
You
how
can
it was.
see it on the site plan
That
of
was
the,
nice.
yeah, sorry.
Mhm. So that was the connection that we were talking about, where there was a potential opportunity to create a through connection to another lot. However, as I said, the applicant is not looking to make that connection, but wants to continue to maintain their 2 access points on the basis of keeping what they already have and avoiding connecting into a residential project where there may be compatibility concerns. So I want to clarify that sharing for a second. Let's see. They also have the modification to the lighting spillover. There's a little bit of lighting spillover along that panhandle that we saw, as well as onto Husky Park, which is to the west of the site. They had marginal amounts of spillover, and so provided their justification for that. And I think that is updates. You'll have the two motions on the modifications and then on the final site plan itself. And once again, we have a condition for that confirmation from the FAA and MAA that the project won't pose any hazard to air traffic.
Okay. Commissioner Lee, any questions or comments? Okay. Commissioner Beatty.
No, thanks.
Okay. So going back to this stub, a couple of questions. One, has that been built out yet? Or is that just in their construction plan?
I don't believe construction has started on that section yet, but I can double check.
I was just curious. And the developer is aware of this and okay that it's not going to be extended?
The civil engineer is the same firm. So it might be a good,
I saw that, yeah.
yeah, might be a good question, maybe on Monday evening to ask.
I would just like, yeah, I just like to understand how this a little bit more how this is going to impact Wren. And whether or not it's appropriate if the civil can tell us how they would modify their plans in light of that not being extended.
How the civil on Wren Quarter?
In Wren Quarter. I don't know if that, you can tell me now if that's not an appropriate question.
No, I think that's a fine question to ask.
Okay. It does seem, in looking at that, one, yes, they'd really have to change the layout. The current applicant, not Wren, the current applicant would really have to change the layout of what they want to put on their site. And for me, it's almost the compatibility again, having a bunch of these commercial vehicles maybe take a shortcut through a residential neighborhood, I don't think would be anything that's desired by the residential folks. And then it could actually be also an issue to have the residential people taking a shortcut through this industrial site. So anyway, I think that was my only question. Anything else from anybody?
I have one question only. I remember seeing something online about this, and even though it's not, and what made me think of it was, Barb, your question about the compatibility with the residential and the industrial. The intersection at Gas House Pike and Highland is really dangerous right now. What are we thinking about is going to be the truck traffic that's going to come down there? And I mean, personally, I think it's a place that needs a traffic light at this point because it's blind.
Right.
There's a house on the corner where you have to move your car basically into the intersection to see oncoming. Do we have any say in that kind of activity of how it's going to impact, even though it's not directly adjacent to the site, the fact that there's going to be increased truck traffic in an already dangerous intersection? Is that something we can even discuss?
Yeah, this is Cherry, and I'm probably will jump in and
Hey,
um,
Jerry.
how are you doing? Yeah, so that particular intersection was an improvement, not physical widening improvement, but Wren Quarter was required to install a traffic signal at that intersection. So it's not Gas House, but it's called East Church today. And so you're talking about this intersection of East Church and Highland Street.
Yes, okay. Yeah, on their
yes.
site plan, it says East Gas House Pike, but yes.
Oh, yeah, I think it used to be called Gas House Pike, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, so Wren is a condition of their approval to install a traffic signal at that location with some minor modification to the approaches. But that improvement will not trigger until they hit certain number of units. And I think there is another overriding condition if the internal street to Wren Quarter, which is called the Bond Street, is extended to Highland Street. So anyway, there is a trigger point at which Wren have to install that traffic signal. And we did consider that as part of the 350 apartment unit project that's on East Church and 7th Street. Given the fact that Wren will be constructing that improvement, that apartment project was required to make a contribution, a pro rata contribution. And that was triggered because the apartment project required a traffic study and an APFO determination. In this case, because this use is, even though it's getting credit for existing uses and will have less impact than what is existing out there, they'd received an exemption and therefore no APFO conditions. So typically, if it was a greenfield development, they probably would have been required to make a contribution to. So to answer your question about the safety of the intersection or traffic operations, yes, there is a signal planned. It's not there today, but the plan is to have the developer install. The second part of your question is the commercial traffic, the truck traffic. So for the purpose of this plan, if you look at the truck traffic plan, the plan is to have trucks come from Monocacy Boulevard through Monroe Avenue and enter and exit the site. So that's the plan the applicant has proposed. If we're putting some restriction on to truck traffic access to Highland, certainly something. Again, I mean, enforcement is then the key. If even if put a condition in there, which we're not typically out there enforcing, but what the applicant has proffered is that their commercial in-out traffic will use Monroe Avenue and direct them to Monocacy Boulevard. And to that point, there will be a signal eventually at the Monocacy Monroe Avenue intersection as well, which Wren is required to install.
And when does that happen? Because that's still I get into trouble there all the time. I know my wife knows a number of people who have gotten into accidents at that one as well.
Yeah, they're correct. Yeah, so they are approaching their permit, residential permit limit to. Again, it probably will be a while. They're just starting the first big intersection improvement, which is at East Patrick and Monocacy, just started with it. So it could be, my guess is that a couple of years down the road when they actually will design and install that signal. There'll be some in lane widening, etc. as well.
This stuff confuses me because the light that goes into Wren Quarter for a property that's only partially occupied now is up and running. And the dangerous intersection where people use it all the time to get to and from the airport, I don't understand the logic of when these things kick in, because you have an unoccupied property, and now we're talking about this property that has two dangerous intersections now that it's going to affect, and it's another 2 years down the road for one, and who knows what the other one is.
Yeah, this phasing of rent kind of play. I know we're getting off the subject here a little bit, but I think just for information, the phasing for rent quarter didn't work out the way we anticipated, because originally the thought was that the 2 apartment buildings with almost 270 plus units will get built first, and would have been served right where they installed the signal at Bond Street, Monocacy intersection, but they just installed the signal. So when we looked at the phasing plan and the mitigation agreement, it made a lot of sense 5 years back to say, yeah, that's the first improvement you want, because that's where you're going to build your first units. But that did not pan out in 5 years with whether the market dictated or not. That those apartments are still not built. So the way the condition or the mitigation agreement is written, that's the number of units that take permit on. So the way the permit release happened, that's the first thing they did. And as they pull the permit, these things will happen. And the other part of it is that signal, probably from a cost standpoint, is relatively easier one to install versus the one at Monocacy and Monroe that could be over $1 million. So I think from a developer standpoint, they're looking to generate some cash flow before they get on significant improvements. And for them, the priority is, and for the city, is to get on with the East Patrick Monocacy intersection first, which is also almost $2 million worth of improvements. That's what that goes first before this one.
I understand what you're saying in terms of us being off topic, but my concern is, while we're looking at these, and I know we've had this discussion before in terms of what we're allowed, when we were talking about the bowling alley property, and we have all those developments that are going on there, and we're not supposed to look at one versus the other. But as a group, we keep on improving projects, and I'm concerned that the related infrastructure on things, the cost of the traffic light, yeah, I understand how it's a concern, but it's a danger concern. And we're doing infill development. We want to have infill development, but I'm really concerned that as a group, we're approving things and we're exacerbating situations that are already bad today. So 2-year kick-ins, I don't understand how we look at an infill development here and we're saying, okay, yeah, let's add some trucks here. And we already have dangerous intersections.
And not to cut you off, Commissioner Beatty, but I've heard Gabrielle comment on this a number of times in the past. These kinds of conversations are really more appropriate for the workshop and for the hearing. And I think it's good for you to say it on Monday, to bring it up in the record, et cetera. So.
Okay.
That the more that this conversation went on, it seemed like this was really, and Gabrielle, if you can expand upon that and give a little bit more context.
Sure.
As to why.
Yeah, without the, this is the public meetings, we're meeting all the Public Meeting Act requirements, and this is televised and whatnot. However, without the benefit, and just as we had the meeting public, without the benefit of the applicants and the public being invited to engage in the conversation, we really want this to be kind of just a kind of simple question answer without starting to divulge a lot of perspective and opinion and those sorts of things, where of course we would want the public and the applicant to be able to weigh in on and the applicant's experts to be able to weigh in on those conversations as well. So for the purpose of this meeting, we want to make sure that we're kind of debriefing you on what's changed between the workshop and the hearing, what your charges are for Monday evening in terms of the things you're going to be approving, and just kind of making sure that you're comfortable with the materials you have in front of you. If you don't know where something is, or you couldn't find a plan, or you couldn't find what we were talking about in a certain point, that's what we want to just make sure that you're well informed to have these conversations at the meeting.
Absolutely, and it's the reason why I'm bringing it up today as opposed to bringing it up then. This as a group, I think this is a concern that we have to address, because I'm answering questions from people on the street all the time. Why is this intersection so damn? You keep approving projects. We're talking about 3 pharmaceutical projects that are going on Monocacy at the same time. Again, I don't know how we look at it in a vacuum, and I'm bringing it up today because I think that's something that we have to have as a discussion going forward, because I don't think we can look at these things in a vacuum. And the more we, I'd hate to see a fatal accident in one of these things, and it's because there was a truck that didn't have a signal and, either blew the stop sign or couldn't see or whatever was going on. I don't want to have that on my conscience, and that's why I'm bringing it up now. Obviously, not Monday, but I think it's something we're going to have as a group. We're going to have to discuss.
And yeah, I think to Barb's point at the beginning of the meeting, she was saying that sometimes she likes to ask leading questions at the hearings. And I think that is brilliant, right? Like if there are things you want us to start the conversation about, to answer the questions, to provide kind of the technical background, those are the types of questions that allow us to make sure we're all operating with the same understanding of the regulations and what's, Shireen's background he's provided about the different projects. So definitely good questions to raise. To have that conversation. So feel free to ask those leading questions.
Okay.
So there was one classic example of this, and it was that area at Patrick and College where there was a number of projects going on at the same time. And that was where our concern was. However, Gabrielle came back, Cherian and Gabrielle came back and explained how even though each one was separate, I may not be using the exact words, it's like the background for the traffic. I mean, it really became additive. So when you look at traffic, it always includes all the background developments that have been approved. And I remember listening to Gabrielle and/or Cherian, or both of you, how you explained how all 3 of them were going to work with their traffic, feeling very comfortable at the end of that. But I think anytime that we do have those kinds of questions, we know those questions are out there in the public, and I'd much rather have the conversation and have it on record than not. So.
And
anything
I
else?
apologize, April.
Oh.
I didn't introduce April to Cherian, and how rude of me. Cherian is our traffic engineer. He works in the engineering department. We don't have the benefit of calling him in the part of the planning department or Shada, but they work so closely and helpfully with us. So you will see Cherian. Shada is also on the call and also in the engineering department. We have Jennifer Vandergreek, who you might have had some emails with previously, setting you up. She's running the show from the behind the scenes and will be clerking at the meeting. And then Lance is with our communications department, and you will probably meet him on Monday as well. He's running all the AV stuff in the background. So
the man behind the curtain.
Yes, exactly. He's making us all look really good.
And Cherian is a great resource, and we do appreciate him.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so we have one more item to talk about, and this is the Monocacy Montessori text amendment.
Yes, so this one also unfortunately got caught in that FNP snafu where the public notice didn't get published right, but moving on, we're on this agenda. So in this staff report, we did try to respond to some of the discussion that we had at the workshop a couple months back. The applicant has provided some supplemental information about traffic because that was one of the questions that were asked. We also talked a little bit about the virtues, benefits, and disadvantages of establishing things as conditional uses. So kind of laid out opportunities, but also constraints of that approach in order to develop a conditional use, the types of decision making that have to go into that. So I expect on Monday to be able to, really flesh that out and describe in more detail why we would want something to be a conditional use, what the opportunities are, and where we see some challenges with this. It is the applicant's text amendment, so they've continued to propose it as a use permitted by right. So that is the request in front of you. So you'll act on that. As you know, this is a recommendation to the mayor and board. You can recommend approval, you can recommend denial, you can recommend changes. You have a lot of liberty to make your recommendations. So that is the summary of the staff report, and I can answer any questions.
Okay, Commissioner Beatty,
No, I have no questions. Thanks.
Commissioner Lee. Okay, well, I'll just say that I appreciate this extra effort from the planning commission, from the staff, the planning staff, giving all this additional information. So, so thank you for that. And I don't have any questions. So, all right. So, anything else?
I do not have
Let's see.
anything else. Yeah, we will double check. I'll send an email. Jennifer did look for me. I was like, did we miss Joan? Did she send an email? We'll follow up with Joan and Dorothy and Alderman McShane and double check their availability for Monday night, just to make sure we're on the straight and narrow. And I will let everybody know.
Well, if the three of us show up, we will have a quorum, because a quorum
Yes.
is 3. But it's always great when everybody can be there.
Exactly.
All right, so the meeting is adjourned. Everybody have a great weekend. See you on Monday.
Happy Veterans Day.
Yes, thank you.
Happy Veterans Day tomorrow.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Enjoy.